In this session, we discuss how data agility propels eBay, the world's online marketplace. We dig into what data agility is and the path for organizations like yours to become more agile with their data. And then finally, how your people, processes, and data benefit from your team building a culture to adapt and respond to market changes and emerging opportunities. My name is Simon Swan, the head of Field Solution Strategy at Talend, and I will be your host, joined a little later by Parani Gandhi, the head of data services at eBay, one of our showcase speakers at Talent Connect this year. We'll be talking to Parani about eBay's modernization journey and some of the challenges they faced, then how they turned those challenges into an opportunity to impact and accelerate their business. Finally, this being a technical session, we'll get hands-on with the API services in Talent Data Fabric to showcase how you can deliver operational agility to your organization. Now, as data becomes one of the most prized assets of any organization, I'm sure a lot of you will appreciate that one of the biggest business problems is that your stakeholders, employees, partners, and even customers don't have ready access to the data that they need on a timeline that suits them. The processes that consume data, those which help drive revenue, reduce cost, identify risk, up-level your customer interactions, are all temporal. The element of time becomes critical path to fully realizing each opportunity. In addition to this, data volumes are increasing. Data can now be collected and shared through so many touch points that on a daily basis, you'll experience a new source of information, and with the complexity of data increasing too, it becomes challenging to avoid a state of paralysis. Teams have to thread the needle working between many apps and data stores, and while the results can be achieved, the outcomes are hard-earned and productivity is low. So, when we add together the dimensions of volume, speed, and accessibility, we need to position a solution to allow us to integrate data, apps, and processes in real time, share APIs to applications, departments, and partners, and automate business processes and workflows. This is how Talend helps our customers accelerate operational data. So, how does this problem manifest itself? In our recent Data Health Barometer survey, 46% of the respondents said that their data lacks the speed and flexibility to satisfy the demands of the business. This is an uncomfortable perspective that the accessibility to data is seen to be a bottleneck to fully realizing the full market potential of the organization. To be a bit more granular, 34% of the people surveyed face challenges in sharing data with the right people and applications, and 31% are not effectively leveraging modern cloud systems and applications. With the enforcement of compliance and minimum accessibility mandates, we will also see that people who need access to data may be aware of the data, but lack a clear approval method or centralized role-based credentials. This lack of agility actually decreases the desire for teams to innovate with the data, choosing the path well traveled, so business users are typically looking at the same data sets and inevitably the same decisions are reached. Layering on new experiences by integrating new apps or infrastructure is not really the solution to the underlying issue. If you can't reach your data, how are you going to maximize your return of investment with additional spend on new technology? You're probably not, especially not in the times of a recession where everyone's eyes are on the budget. The ultimate goal for any organization is to meet or exceed customers' and market needs, but expectations and market conditions are changing swiftly, and customers are demanding faster delivery and better customer experiences. If you can't deliver, they will do their business elsewhere. And let's not forget your internal customers too, the people and teams that you service, the line of business partners. Your organization has new and evolving demands, and if the people you need to support don't get the service level they expect, they will also start to look at other tools and apps, again, increasing the scale of the problem. Being a strategic partner and future-proofing the business is a mantle you and your team can pick up and showcase. It's your time to shine. If you are instrumental in creating a pivot to data agility, you will help your business address scaling customer demands, accelerate business objectives, and even provide stability and insight as to how to navigate market condition headwinds. Talend are well positioned to help as we work with you to accelerate your operational data. So let's recap by considering one of our customers who have undertaken this journey, eBay. I'm pretty sure we all know eBay pretty well, but you may be surprised to understand more about the velocity of items being sold every second of every day of every year. From a buyer perspective, Consider all the members of your family, your friends, the businesses that interact with the platform, each have very different requirements from this one. Basically, they each buy differently. Then, from a seller perspective, you may be looking to downsize and sell unwanted items. You may be looking to build a small business to sell items that you produce or acquire. Or you may be looking to integrate an existing brand to expand your total audience. The modern customer experience is such that providing companion services and recommendations is the way that most consumers and businesses successfully interact. The management of customer experiences can be seen as a business itself. An example of a customer experience could be with buying and selling trading cards. On eBay, one is sold every second. That's an eye-watering number of transactions yearly. For those purchasers, authentication and grading of your collectible is very desirable, so that certification is provided and trust is assured. With refurbished products, sellers want to get high-quality items to customers quickly. Speed and trust are recurrent themes, which are the same requirements we have of our data. In their initial delivery, eBay worked with 600 integrations across 3 platforms, and there are 300 connected apps. All of that accounts for 16 million jobs run annually. This complexity is echoed by other customer stories. Typically, teams will be managing a whole variety of sources and destinations, data processors, people, culture, and that's without external factors too. It's challenging to implement a one-size-fits-all solution, and given the divergent nature of the requirements, it's tough to address key stakeholders within the business to reach a consensus on prioritization and implementation. It's also prudent to acknowledge our journey to this point. Legacy systems have provided a little too much comfort, but at the cost of acquiring technology debt and stifling progress, which again circles back to siloed data. So, it's time for change, just like eBay did. This complex reality triggered eBay's journey to adopt a modern and unified platform. They've moved from legacy technology that lacked flexibility and scale across multiple platforms to allow them to regain control of operations and their data and even future-proof their investments. To innovate in this area, you should consider assembling your own world-class data team to take down some of the biggest blockers. To address technology debt, ensure at the planning stage you look forward rather than iterating on what works today. Working with partners, vendors, and technology platforms really helps you keep pace with trends and innovations. When assembling your team, look wider. Having cross-functional representation means that you create a culture of collaboration. We don't need to pull just from data engineering, we have so many more active contributors and consumers. This way, we incorporate business-facing roles, subject matter experts, and centralized compliance and governance into the mix. We need to work smart. Determine the cost of change, not by the volume of data, but by the impact. Work to determine which areas have the biggest benefits and can be provided as interim deliverables to deliver value immediately. Look to implement frameworks to do the heavy lifting so you can refocus key engineering resource on strategic design rather than tactical maintenance. Talend's data fabric provides a cohesive set of industry-leading tools, so when tackling these workloads, you can do so confidently from a standardized platform. You are able to manage, secure your data, share repeatable building blocks to build process consistency, and centrally manage your organization's access and roles. This will ensure more and more people from around your organization are productive as they create, consume, and socialize data. Talend helps our customers to build a scalable plug-and-play infrastructure, so new datasets, apps, and workloads are rapidly integrated into your universe. At the same time, you can offer a service or an API to share data across the business in just a few clicks, again, utilizing those same building blocks. Talend helps your organization eliminate the data bottleneck, so you are asking questions of your customers and not your data. This in turn allows the businesses to be far more reactive to evolving market conditions, something we all feel today. If you speak to most chief data officers, one of the most common themes is we need to move more quickly. And Talend does that by accelerating operational data. In this section, I'll be talking to Parani Gandhi, the head of data services at eBay. How are you doing, Parani?
Doing good, Simon. How are you?
Fantastic. I know you've been very busy at Talend Connect these last few days. So basically, let's get started with the questions. So when embarking on a new technology initiative, it can be challenging. How did you and your team adapt your existing skills to become proficient to build with Talend?
not doing this was not an option for us. We were working on a 20-plus-year-old technology stack. Business has been changing. eBay 22 years ago is totally different than eBay today. We went through so many different acquisitions and divestitures, and had left us with a very fragmented data landscape. So we had to do this. And the biggest challenge is, one, while we are used to this business as a whole, Talend is definitely new. None of my team was a Talend expert. And as we were embarking on this journey, your team actually gave us access to Talend Academy. That was a huge help. And my architects got onto Talend Academy, and that's was a big driver during our evaluation too. We were using Talend Academy quite a bit while we are doing the evaluation of this product, while we are trying to build these use cases. As we were moving forward, I basically brought my entire team and gave them access to Talend Academy, and brought in a few technical experts along with your professional services team. And we utilized them to actually build a template-based approach. So, the technical experts built the templates that the juniors can then use. So this is how we were able to scale. That, as well as, we picked the simplest use cases first to deliver. It helped us in two different ways. One is we were able to gain knowledge and comfort in that whole region. And two, we were able to demonstrate our business partners that we were able to do this. And that's a huge deal, because without our business partners blessing this and supporting this, this is not going anywhere. And then, finance was our biggest consumer in this space. So we started with that. We delivered a bunch of simple use cases, got their buy-in, and then we are in business.
That's great, because I know with using solution templates, it serves obviously as an accelerator, but also allows you to prove business value to the rest of the organization. One thing which is quite common with these types of initiatives is that it's very much a cross-functional type of approach there. How did you sell this to other areas of the business?
Yes, Talend was implemented for corporate services in eBay, which essentially is the back office and the business driving function of eBay. So it's like finance, HR, legal, workplace resource, security, IT, those kind of functions. And each business partner has their own priority and preferences. Our business is moving data. As long as we are moving, we are transparent. Nobody really knows that we exist, and that's how we like it. When we go to them and say, we are going to remove this big, robust, platform that's been running for 20+ years, and going to put something new, no matter how great the new one is, there's going to be an apprehension. Yeah. And we did, face the same challenges there too. Finance being our largest and most, challenging area, we decided to pick that one first, because the thought process is, if we get the buy-in from finance, then everybody else will fall behind and support us. So, we use SAP for our enterprise system, and SAP, we have quite a bit of knowledge in it, and we use some proprietary technology in SAP to do RFCs. If you look at the legacy systems versus the modern technology systems, there is really no parity on those kind of mechanisms and methods. However, using Talend, we were able to build some joblets to basically solve that problem for us. We were able to build a joblet that kind of mimicked or replaced what our legacy system was doing with SAP. This was a big benefit. Like, we are able to build the joblet, and now every developer that's working on SAP interfaces can reuse these joblets. And basically, we are able to accelerate the way we are delivering these things. And so we went live. The first release went live about 3 months after we kicked off the project. And in that release, we went live with 100 integrations, mostly finance. That gave the business the confidence level that they needed to support us.
Wow, that's tremendous, the velocity that you managed to achieve. Obviously, business agility, creating a plug-and-play framework, if you will, to actually allow you to move forward. Now, when you embarked on this, you had about 500 data integrations, but now it's about a year or so in. How many integrations do you have? And how do you see this growing moving forward?
Yep, we started with about 500 when we went live with this. This is quite a bit of a reduced number from our legacy, where we consolidated, we kind of refactored and streamlined it. There are some features in Talend that we were able to utilize that helped us reduce the number of integrations overall. This also helped us reduce the number of transactions we are dealing with. So now, almost a year in, we are about 20% higher on the number of integrations that we have now. This is a bit of an outlier because this is a little bit of a higher growth than we normally have experienced in this space. That's because there's some pent-up demand as well as some divestitures that we were just kind of finishing up. We anticipate there is going to be a growth of about 5 to 7% on a year. But that's not where we want to stop. While we implemented Talend in the corporate services space, we are now expanding the usage of Talend into eBay.com. So we are working on a customer data platform across eBay, and we are using Talend to acquire data from third party and bring it in. Here, the use case is a bit different than corporate services. Whereas in corporate services, you have a very wide data framework, whereas the depth is much shallow. Like you don't deal with the maximum number of records I deal with is a few millions. Here, on the other hand, is that we're dealing with billions of records on a given transaction. So by utilizing Talend, we are hoping that we will get the standardization as well as the streamlining that we were able to achieve in the corporate services in our eBay.com platform as well.
Awesome. So obviously not everything can be plug and play when you're working with data like this. Obviously there's some complexities, which I think talks a lot to Talend's extensibility. Could you outline potentially one of the blockers or challenges that you may have had with any area of this project and how you actually overcame that with Talend?
So we had a few challenges. There are some critical functions that we have to support. A good example would be Swift instructions. We operate in 60 different countries, on hundreds of markets. And here, money transfers is a big function, and we deal with hundreds of banks across the world. So Swift instructions becomes a big challenging solution that we have to deliver. It's not easy to actually build that functionality, but because of the way Talend enabled us to build once and use it multiple times, we were able to build a joblet that was able to do the Swift handling, the file handling, and we were able to use it in every use case that needed that kind of a handling. Another good use case is bank statements. Again, these are another complex file format that the banks give us. These are like, but that's standard across the globe. So, once you build it for one bank, you can apply it on any number of banks. And so we built another joblet that was helping us do this BIA 1 and 2 file formats, and we were able to reuse these components. So similarly, the extendability as well as the reusability aspect of Talend, helped us big time in terms of consolidating and streamlining our landscape. This also helped us, clean up the support landscape as well. We don't have to deal with 50 different flavors of a same interface. We have just one.
Understood. I guess one of the measures of success then is the fact that once you've implemented it, people don't really understand what's behind the scenes. You build, you deliver, and it's seamless. People don't really have to worry about the data itself. In terms of measuring success, how were you able to do that during the life cycle of this project?
So first level is being able to deliver the solution as well as migrating all the solutions that I have into the new platform. We started with 600 integrations. We were, that's how many we had across the 3 platforms that we are supporting. We went through, an exercise even before the project kickoff to consolidate them and then try to templatize them. Now, once we consolidated, we ended up with about 500 interfaces. Now we implemented the 500 interfaces in about 8 months. So that's a big achievement as it is. The way we structured this project, and we met with other system integrators as well as some of your competitors. Nobody gave anything less than 18 months to do this project. Whereas here we are, we finished this project in 8 months. And then we actually made it better. That in itself is actually a great success story to basically take it back to our leaders as well as our business partners. In addition to that, by standardizing and using a ton of reusable components, make once and use it many times, we are now able to deliver much faster. So we're able to get to market quicker for our business partners. But what we are trying to do is this, okay? In addition to using Talend for the corporate services function, we are expanding this into our eBay.com function and basically working on a customer data platform utilizing Talend. Here, the game is different. Like rather than having a lot of connections and a lot of applications and a low volume of data moving, here we are having a handful of connections and applications, but the data volume is huge. We're talking about billions of records every time we actually do a transaction. And so here we are trying to expand Talend into that space, and we hope that this will give the much needed standardization as well as the efficiencies that we were able to demonstrate on the corporate services side flow over to the business side.
That's wonderful to hear. Obviously, data sharing is a huge part of this initiative. What do you see as the future state with Talend? How do you anticipate growing with the platform?
So, on the corporate services side, there is going to be a slow and steady growth. I would anticipate about 5 to 7% growth on an annual basis. And we have structured and basically architected the solution as well as a landscape to handle that kind of a growth. On the eBay.com side, it is things are yet to be decided actually. Right, we just picked up on the CDP. We have delivered a proof of concept which has been so far well received, and we are trying to productionalize that. Once we do that and demonstrate this to the eBay leaders, I think the sky is the limit. So.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. Thank you very much for partnering with Talend to accelerate your operational data. And thank you for your time, Prani. Right, I think it's time now that we actually get hands-on with the software. We're going to start talking APIs, and I'll showcase the features within Talend Data Fabric. As you have seen with eBay's use case, businesses need to be able to share data internally through APIs and services. The needs now are more diverse than ever. Technical teams need to tailor their services to evolving business requirements, while lines of business need simple ways to share data to other teams or applications. In this demonstration, I will show you how you can benefit from Talend's suite of applications to design, document, build, and test services. There are two ways to deliver APIs with Talend. The first follows a data-first approach. A citizen integrator or data engineer deploys Talend's data API without any technical knowledge or heavy lifting. It's particularly useful to expose data as is. The second follows a contract-first approach, meaning that the API is designed beforehand and the business logic and the data retrieval is developed afterwards. This is the approach eBay has taken. It imposes on the different parties to agree in advance with the requirements and outcomes. It also requires more logic and technical development, but it also offers more flexibility. These two approaches are complementary and allow for a wide range of use cases and users. So, let's start by opening Talend's data inventory support data dataset. This dataset represents the support data of the company's customers. The ERP used to manage the support system runs on-premise, so a remote engine is up and running on-premise too, to access the data on behalf of Talend data inventory. As shown here on the overview page, the trust score is quite high, which means the dataset is trustworthy and we're confident in sharing this data. The question is, how can we quickly make this data available through an API so that it can be used to power an internal service? Here we'll leverage Data Inventory's new ability to make datasets available via APIs in just a few clicks. Without being experts and without any understanding of the complexities of API development, we'll share data via self-service APIs in minutes instead of the typical week-long process of reaching out to specialists. We'll go to the API tab, name the endpoint, and protect the endpoint by defining who can access it. The API will now be built and its endpoint deployed to the Talend remote engine either on-premise or in the cloud. We can see the endpoint now has been enabled. This screen will also provide operational information such as the request status, both failed and successful requests. Moreover, Talend provides endpoints that can be accessed by monitoring tools such as Prometheus and Grafana. This allows operations teams to set up enterprise-grade monitoring within existing environments. In the Prometheus and Grafana example available in the documentation, operations teams can track multiple data API usage, drill down on each of them for fine-grained analysis. The support data is now accessible via a data API. The goal of the company is to build a composite service based on the support data and Salesforce data, and that provides a consolidated customer view. This time, a contract-first approach is taken. Let's start with Talend API Designer. Using a no-code interface, an API developer can define and describe all aspects of the API definition. Clicking on New, we can name the API definition Customer. Then I can define our data structures. For example, the support priority will be defined as an enumeration of 3 values, low, moderate, and high. Providing data structures will allow data validation while defining the API. Similarly, I can define the main data structure, Customer. For a smooth configuration, Talend's API Designer lets you use a JSON example to populate the data structure and avoid unnecessary error-prone typing. Once the data structures are well defined, let's add the main operation to the API definition. Here we create a GET operation. This operation will allow service consumers to request customers' data using their IDs as the identifier. For this reason, we configure the path from which this operation is callable using a variable named ID. Then we finalize the definition of this operation by providing all possible responses. Here we are defining 2 responses, a successful one returning the status code 200 and an unsuccessful one returning a status code 404. The expected response structure is also specified using the data structure Customer. Thanks to its graphical user interface, Talend Cloud API Designer is easy to use and accessible. It helps API developers follow API development best practices and automates documentation activities that are often overlooked. Here in the definition settings, we can enable live documentation, which delivers a hosted documentation for the team based on the definition entries. This saves tremendous time and fosters collaboration. Once we have defined the main characteristics of our API, let's open Talend Studio as an integration specialist and import the API definition from Talend Cloud directly. Thanks to Talend API's Designer complete integration with Talend Studio, a link between the API Designer and the API Implementer is facilitated. Here, an integration specialist can simply drag and drop the definition in Talend Studio's canvas, which results in the automated configuration of a T-REST request component. Next, we will develop the business logic of the service. We can use the T-REST client component to request the support data from the data API we previously created. Finally, we will extract the relevant data from the JSON response and map it with Salesforce data using Talend's native Salesforce component. The return responses are defined in the tmap component. Once the composite service deployment is complete, we will first run it locally. In order to test the microservice behavior, let's access Talend's API tester. The Talend API tester lets you perform API response tests and creates test scenarios to validate the entire microservice behavior. In this example, we will run simple tests to check the microservice responses and make sure the response structure conforms to our expectations. When the customer is found, the request returns the status code 200. When the customer is not found, a status code of 404. This is the expected behavior. In Talend API Designer, assertions and environment variables can also be created to increase the scope and the reusability of the tests. This is particularly important for CI/CD purposes where tests are part of the workflow to ensure no regressions are propagated to production environments. Services can be deployed as standalone software within a remote engine or as a Docker container. In this case, we will deploy this microservice in a remote engine running on-premise. By deploying Talend Management Console, I can manage the organization's remote engines. Here the configuration has already been done and the remote engine runs successfully. The last step is meant to facilitate the discoverability and consumption of the API by other developers in the organization. Talend Cloud API Designer allows API developers to create an API portal. The API portal centralizes API documentation so that it's easily shared with the consumers. From Talend API Designer, we access the API Portal tab. The API Portal deployment process is fully automated. Using Git for version control, Talend generates a template to power the portal and populates it with your API documentation. The portal is deployed as a static website so that it can be hosted by services such as Azure Static Web Apps. In this case, Azure Active Directory authentication and authorization can be set up to manage the access to the services. To conclude this demonstration, we have seen how Talend enables two different approaches in the deployment of APIs. The first one, a data-first approach, allows you to deploy data APIs in minutes without any technical knowledge. The second one, a contract-first approach, requires organizational agreement and technical development while providing API developers with more flexibility and scalability. Thank you for joining this session. I hope you were able to see that using Talend's Data Fabric, we were able to accelerate our operational data for eBay, the world's online marketplace.